Shonna, we talked about that feeling of losing purpose when you come home. So for missionaries who are feeling that they're grieving, they don't know what on earth they're supposed to do next, and how could it possibly be as meaningful as it was before? What's one thing they can do to just start moving forward?
Like, where is God working? See where he's working around you. And that could be, in a public school, that could be in your church. It could be, I'm going to go sit at Panera and pray for people. Just ask the Lord, it's like, is there a group of people that you might have a heart for now that you might not have had a heart for? Like, my heart is for people in Reentry. I didn't know that, so I went to Reentry.
Welcome to this episode of the Modern Day Missionaries podcast. Today we're talking about a subject that it feels like no one used to talk about, and now it feels like everyone's starting to talk about, and it's a good thing. And it's a topic of reentry, of missionaries returning from the field to their passport country. Why do I say it's a good thing? It's a good thing because it happens. The majority of missionaries at some point, whether it's old age or whether it is finishing a term or a crisis, come back at a certain point. And it's so important that we take care of our missionaries well when they return, just as much as when we send them out. And for missionaries, for you to kind of know what that's going to entail. So we talked today with Shonna Ingram. She's the founder and director of Reentry Experts, which is an organization that helps missionaries through this process. And oh gosh, we talked today about the things that we wish we would have known when we re-entered, a lot of the kind of behind the scene things of what happens when a missionary is going through re-entry. So if you're a missionary, pay attention. If you support a missionary, pay attention. We want to make this process as smooth for them coming back as it was for them to go, because God's not done with you yet. He has a plan for you sending, and he has a plan for you returning. And so that is the hope for today, is to give you practical tools, inspiration, some behind the scene looks, some myth busters as to what that process really looks like and how you can do it well and let God transition you into what's next for you in life. So with that, let's jump into today's episode with Shonna Ingram. Hey, Shonna, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today.
It's great to be here. Thanks.
It is great to have you. And Shonna, we're talking about re-entry today. We know it's something that's hard, but I think for a lot of missionaries, it can feel way more than just hard. It can feel like an identity crisis, like the ground beneath them has shifted. And it kind of has. They've moved to a new place. I'd love to just start off by asking you, what's one of the most unexpected or even shocking moments that you experienced when you returned home? Something that made you think, nobody prepared me for this.
Well, I don't know if there was one particular thing. I think it was lots of different things on top of each other. But we were talking about this the other night. We have a group that gets together once a month. And it was like, well, what was it? And I thought, we went over a little bit older. We weren't right out of college. We had moved, we had a house, we had the kids already. And so I thought, hey, we're just going to move back. And we were only gone 5 years. So I was like, hey, we're just going to, move back in and things were going to be the same. But it's like, oh, well, you don't have any credit history for 5 years. It's like, oh, okay. Oh, you have to re-enroll your kids. Well, you don't have the paperwork. And so we had to go find paperwork. And it was just like all of this. Plus on top of that, it's like, oh, we live in Texas. So I was like, there's like 5 different energy companies. And it was just like, I think it was all that they were all on top of each other all at one time. I'm like, oh no, wait, what's going on here? For sure.
Yeah, the compound nature of it. You're absolutely right. And I think your exposure to visiting back, home to your passport country in the past has been for different purposes. You've been going to have a furlough or to raise funds or to maybe take a break. And so you didn't have to deal with any of those realities of life. And it's funny. I love that you brought up only 5 years because it does. It feels like it's maybe not that long. I've even talked to people who've been gone for 2 years or a year, and they're jarred when they get back. And I think too, when it's a shorter period of time, you think there's no way things can have changed that much. They're not realizing how much you have changed, not to mention the place you lived in before. If you're going back even to the same place, you might be in a new state or a new city. There is so much to learn. And I like that you're pointing out some of those less obvious things, because there's some obvious things that I think we think of, like, oh, I need to prepare for, I don't know, getting a house and furnishing stuff or renting a place. I mean, there's, getting a car. There's stuff like, oh my gosh, I don't have a credit history. I've talked to several people and they could not believe how much that caught them off guard.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, even simple things. I remember I had some friends who moved back and they went, we're in our 40s and we're having to buy silverware all over again. Like,
Yep.
I don't want to do this again.
Yeah.
I remember for us, health insurance. We have a child with special needs. And I forgot the first time I got her that special health insurance, it took over a year to obtain it. And it took almost a year again to reobtain it when we got back. I mean, it is wild. Can you think of any other ones that just catch people off guard, maybe caught you or you see them catching other people off guard that you don't think to prepare for?
I think another area is relationships. Like everybody's had a life while you've been gone, and you don't know how to fit in. I think
Ooh.
that's been a really hard one that I've walked people through. It's like, oh, or they're coming back, like, with special needs children, or their parents are aging and it's not, so it's just like, okay, it's just not reentry. There's just lots of different levels of grief and processing, and like, oh, I didn't know that it was going to be this hard. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
a
You
lot.
just can't even conceptualize that it could possibly be that difficult. Also, if you are listening and you're getting ready to move back, we are not here to scare you today. Shonna and I love you. We're here to encourage you and maybe bring up a couple things that you haven't thought of, not to overwhelm you, just so that they don't take the wind out of your sails. And Shauna, I love that you brought up things that are beyond task lists or to-do lists, because we started talking about a few of the things that you have to do, but you don't put relationships on a to-do list. Like, that's not something that you think, this is what I have to do when I get back. Find out how to fit in. That's on no one's list. And yet,
Yeah.
there you go. And
Yeah.
you brought up grief too. That's when you can sort of put on a to-do list, like find a counselor or do a debrief. So there's things you can do about it, but not a whole lot you can do to prepare for what that will feel like. I'd love to ask you, um, what are some of the biggest myths that you think missionaries have about reentry, or maybe even their supporters supporting churches?
You're just moving back home, I think is, oh, we're
Yeah.
just moving back home. People assume reentry is just like any other move. We're just relocating physically. We're, but just the emotional space, uh, our identity sort of shifts a little bit. Um, you're just going to pick up where you left off, might be another myth. Um, Both you and your
Yeah.
home culture have changed. I know America has changed and is keep changing, and people
Mhm.
don't know, um, like, how do I have a conversation? And I know that over at Global Trellis, they did some research on this, um,
Yeah.
and they actually put it in, I think, Christianity Today, and it was like, coming back of understanding, like, social norms. What am I supposed to say, and what am I not supposed to say? And if I say, what do I believe? What do I believe anymore? And what if my family doesn't believe the same way? Because I've seen things
Mhm.
that have been really hard. I think that's been one of our areas. Um, and maybe another myth would be everything is fine because you're just surrounded by familiar things and familiar people. But in my space where I work, I have a lot of missionaries and cross-cultural workers that say that they feel unseen and misunderstood.
Yeah.
So
And it is hard to understand. I mean, I can put myself in the shoes of people who are in relationship with missionaries but haven't walked through it. It is hard to understand. We can barely understand our own experiences sometimes. Like, what the heck did I just go through? What what was that? So they don't have the tools or always the equipping to know how to do it. And some people just aren't very good listeners, if we can be honest. They don't know how to ask questions and they get overwhelmed by our big feelings. And it's tough. I love too that you brought up Global Trellis and Amy Young in that survey. We actually did an episode with Amy Young
mhm.
last year where we dug into the results of that and what missionaries are really feeling and experiencing and how shocking it can be for them and for their supporters. So for people who want to learn more about that, they can go back and revisit that episode and hear some of the stuff Amy had to share. But yeah, there's so much that's unknown. And what I appreciate what you're doing, Shonna, is you're bringing a lot of that to light. You're demystifying this experience. And you actually broke down the reentry process into 3 phases. Could you explain what those are and how they work?
Yes, it was hard. We do have timelines for them. However, we know that everybody's experience is different.
Yeah.
So I always preface with that just because you've been back for a certain amount of time that you are in this phase. So the first one, I think there actually is quite a bit of literature on it. We call return. So it would be great if we talk about returning in pre-field. It's like, you know what? You might come back. And that's okay. Like, so if we can start there, that would be a great place
Mm.
to start. That's
So
like,
talk
oh,
about returning before they even leave for the first time.
yeah. So that would be a definitely good recommendation, or at least knowing going in to your last term that you're going to be returning. Again, in a perfect world, that would be great. However, we know that doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
Uh,
For all of us who returned in COVID and we're like, what?
exactly.
Yeah.
um, so there is that space. So if we could sort of think of 9 months before we head back, um, there are some things we need to do. We can do, and a lot of that is like, how do we end our term well? How do we, you know, what comes the raft, right, is one of the big things. It's like, how do we say goodbye to people? How do we emotionally prepare? So we actually have a checklist for 90 days out, 60 days out, 30 days out, even a week out, that you can, you know, check off. It's like, okay, I did this and I did that. So, it's sort of that practical space, but also the emotional space to it. And then you
Yeah.
come back and and you make sure you have your housing, and you make sure you have transportation, and you make sure you have internet and health insurance and all of those practical things. And on average, that probably takes 3 to 6 months if you know you're coming back. If you don't know, you might be living with a parent for a year, or
Did that.
yeah, or a church might have a place for you to live. So again, not
Mhm.
putting certain timelines on there, but to getting to like, okay, Maslow's hierarchy of need, we've got everything taken. We can function. However, if you're also in a place of unexpected, there might be some legal things that you need to deal with if you're in the middle of a divorce, or medical things that you need to actually put on your plate. So that return is going to take a little bit longer. And then we get to enter into the next phase that we call restore, which again, average 6 months to 2 years post return. We like to call this the space in between two worlds. Um, and sometimes that can be really messy.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
because the adrenaline is wearing off, and now you're sort of dealing with sort of identity or relationships, and you're like,
And
oh
everyone's asking you so many questions. What are you going to
yeah,
do next? What
yeah,
now? What now?
yeah, and you're like, wait, hold on, like 2 weeks in, and everybody kept telling my husband, it's like, okay, well, you're gonna go get a real job now. It's like, no, I'm planning on staying with the organization. And we lost, part of our story is we lost our biggest supporting church and our biggest supporting single supporter,
Wow.
all within like 3 months back, even though we had told them, we're staying with the mission. And so that really
Oh,
just played into like, oh, I don't even know what to do. Or, you know, it was like the hardest time in our marriage. It
oh
was
man.
like he was looking at how to get the phone bill down lower, and I'm like, oh, we just need to get a job. And I was like, wow, we are looking at this really differently.
And
And
the enemy just uses that type of stuff too to beat you down. Like, look at
mhm,
you. You don't have a purpose anymore. You don't have a calling. What are you doing? I mean, it really, you think you, as grounded as you think you are in your faith, the
yeah,
enemy will use those low emotional times to just really go after you.
yeah,
So thanks for being vulnerable and even just talking about some of what you guys experienced. It's tough.
yeah.
Tough's a nice word.
Yes. But I mean, there is a process through it.
Yes, there
So I
is.
mean, we do give spaces to grieve. I think is a big
Mm.
place of forgiveness. I think one of the biggest things we have to do is forgiving ourselves of looking at lies that we might believe or expectations that either we put on ourselves or churches or families or yeah. And so we sort of dive deep in that season of looking at that space. And that again, but we can get stuck in that.
Hmm.
We can get stuck in that. And I know people that have been dealing with that. I'm not an overseas missionary anymore. So I'm done. God's done with me. I can't, there's nothing for me left. And that's like, no, there's much more.
There is. And Shauna and I are talking to you from the other side of the restore phase. You
Yes.
got this. There is hope on the other side. And we're also, I know we have a lot of listeners who are, well, everyone I believe who listens has faith and believes that God is good and has good things for them.
Yeah.
Um, and yet, let's say if you're going to run a marathon, if you run a marathon, we are not being negative people if we say like you will probably hurt after the marathon, your muscles will be sore, you will probably be dehydrated, there will be some things that will happen to your body after you run a marathon. That is not being negative, that is not expecting the worst, that is just being straight up logical. Like, hey, when you do hard things, it's hard, it's tough on
Yeah.
you physically, emotionally, spiritually. Like, we're just being really practical here today.
Yeah.
But there is hope on the other side. And so I think that it's really important to acknowledge the difficulty, not from a place of being negative, but from a place of preparing. I mean, the Bible talks about count the cost. We count the cost when we go on the field. But part of counting the cost, as you mentioned, Shauna, even in that before we leave, is saying, Lord, help me to count the cost, knowing this is going to be hard going and this is going to be hard coming back. And I think, and talking to you and many others, that reentry culture shock can oftentimes be way more difficult than initially moving because you don't have all the rah of everyone behind you. Everyone's just like, oh, you're back now. Oh, we don't need to support you anymore. I don't want to say everyone, but with many
Yeah.
people, it can be. So the restore phase is hard. Yes, that's what we're saying. And you will make it through. And God has good stuff for you on the other side. And that leads us right to phase 3, which is,
Rebuild.
hey.
Yay. We get to rebuild. Um, so part of my training is a career development specialist, on top of my trauma training. So this is where it's like, oh, we get to maybe integrate that part of us that happened overseas, and how do we integrate that into our next season? So I think integration is a great word for that. But through that, we get to look at, well, what values do I have that might be different than we had before? What motivations? What's motivating us now? What is it that we can bring to the world now that's
Yeah.
different? And that God still loves us, even though we're not a cross cultural worker. And I don't know how many times that just sits with people that our identity has been in that we've done, this thing overseas. But it's like, no, he can use us more. And we're great examples of that. Yeah,
Yes.
of taking that space. So I have people that are like, I'm going to go work with refugees because I still need that cross cultural, you know, place. Or they will go on trips, maybe short term trips. Also, some people are like, I'm just done. Like, that wasn't for me. And, I've got my husband teaches in a school that's very diverse, um, ethnic, ethnically, and so that there's still places, especially in if you live in the U.S. now, there is a very much big culture changes. I was talking to a friend. I live in the Dallas area, so she's like, in my little town in Forney, which I don't know how many people it is. It's like we have 136 different languages
Wow.
represented in, a town of, 500,000 people. It's just, the world again is changing, and it's almost coming here to the States. So you can always have a big cross cultural, if that's something that you still feel like God is calling you to.
It's true. And I love that you mentioned earlier about what are the ways that we're different? What are the ways we've changed? Because if you think about us coming back, there are things that we will have gained. We'll have become much richer people because of the experience we've lived through. We might come back with new language, with new cross-cultural, experiences and lenses and worldviews and understanding. And there's so much that you can learn even in a short period of time overseas. And on the other side too, we might come back with some trauma
Mhm.
and with having lived through some pretty brutal things, whether they're physical things we lived through, or emotional experiences, or spiritual things. I mean, it's a lot. So we come back with a lot. And so with rebuild and what you're talking about, we're leaning into what are some of the beautiful ways in which I've grown and changed. How can I kind of let that get synthesized and integrated into a new way of being, whether it's with my current ministry or whether it's something totally new. My husband actually, we still have a nonprofit where we work with Spanish speaking pastors and missionaries. So that's a huge part of what we do. And he really felt called to go back to school to become a marriage and family therapist. So he's now working in the school system as a marriage and family therapist, working with families and children in a Spanish immersion school. How amazing is that? Like, would have never thought he'd go that way. And it's so right. So we're getting to do kind of this blend of things, a little bit like what you talked about. So there's new paths and new doors that God wants to open on one side. And then let's talk for a second about that other side, about maybe some of the tough things that we bring back. You've mentioned that your approach is very trauma informed, and trauma is a word that we are using more now. It wasn't comfortable for Christians for a long time, but we're being honest about what we experienced. So, what does that look like for missionaries entering back in and looking at that concept of trauma and maybe how that impacted them during their time there?
Mhm. I think every situation is so different. And if you look at the definition of trauma, it's just goes beyond your ability to cope. And we come from, like, I call a post-traumatic growth, where like we it's okay that something hard has happened to us, and that we can grow from it. And so I think that's but again, like I said, there is a process of learning and seeing what losses we had overseas. And again, depending how we come into reentry, definitely affects how we're going to, like, what happened to us on the field. So we need to look at, oh, yeah, and definitely work with a possible, a therapist or, a trauma informed coach or somebody
Debrief.
debrief that says, yeah, that was really hard and that really sucked. and um and we, but we're here with you in it. And so that's what one of the things that we're trying to do is create safety, a safe space, because there isn't a safe space necessarily around this area. So we do that in community,
Yes.
through our program. But yeah, trauma is just, I didn't know that I had trauma because I was thinking that trauma was one big bad thing that happened to us. But now we have lots of words of, neuroplasticity, and so we can change. We can change the brain.
Yeah, and you talk about the importance of processing loss during reentry, which I think is so good because I think too, uh, with Christians, sometimes we can fall in one of two camps, and one is the camp of, and I shouldn't say Christians, I would just say people in general. We can fall in the camp of victim mentality, like the second I identify that I've had trauma or I've had difficulty in my past, I can go into trauma mode and go on one ditch and say, well, it's this person's fault and this is what happened to me. And that doesn't have a growth mindset. I mean, referencing Carol Dweck, as you brought up mindset, victim mentality is there's no post-traumatic growth. It's like, oh, poor me. This is awful. Look at what happened to me. And let's be real. There are times we have been victimized. We could actually have been victims. So we're not saying to say that you are a victim and have experienced something is bad. You might be a victim, but there's a difference between being a victim and victim mentality. So we're talking about the extreme of being in and staying in victim mentality. Then on the other side, this would be more the Christian one you see a lot, especially with tough missionaries. There's the extreme of like, I'm fine. There's other people who've been through tougher things. It's no worries. God's got me. I've got the victory. And there is almost a non-acknowledgement of it. Like, yeah, that happened, but whatever. I'm totally fine. Because we lean into this hyper positivity where we ignore or we push down because we think that if we don't say it, it disappears. Instead, it's just a shoving and a packing down. And at some point, if you pack something too full, it's like that Jack in the Box. Bong! It's going to come flying out. And yet there is this space in between victim mentality and nothing happened to me. I am great. Hallelujah. And that's that space in between of naming. We're not blaming, we're naming. Like, okay, so yeah, I was a victim of something that happened to me. This happened. This was wrong. This was actually terrible. And you know what? I even need to cry about it and grieve and go through all of this. But it's not going to send me over here to this extreme place. And it's not going to send me here to this extreme place. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to process it through. And I'm going to let God bring healing to me. But yeah, I remember when I went through trauma therapy when we came back. Long story to that one. But I remember them saying, you cannot heal what you cannot feel. Yes. And I didn't want to feel that. I remember saying out loud to my husband, like, why do people have to feel so many feelings? It's so much easier to not feel, as if I had somehow escaped that or my personality had permitted me to not go there. You gotta go there. So hey, all you positive people, it's okay. You can go there. You can name your stuff and don't feel scared of going to victim mentality place. If you're hyper positive, you're not going to go there anyways. So nothing's going to get you there. Let God do the work in you and get you to the place where you can process through that healing. Be sad. And okay, Shonna, I want to invite you to speak into that. Talk a little bit about the importance of processing grief and what are healthy ways to do that.
There are different ways to process grief. There's lots of resources out there. I think the first thing we need to notice is that grief has been so, I think it's coming to light now that people realize that grief isn't just about a death. of a person. So first we need to realize, oh, I am grieving. That I'm not just grieving a death of a person, but I'm grieving a dream. I'm grieving relationships. I'm grieving security. Um, yeah, I'm grieving possessions. For our TCK kids, the pets that we had to leave behind.
Yeah.
I think for, again, like you said, naming it, that we sort of sit with it, and what does it look like. And then there's just things that we can control in that, and sometimes there's things that we can't control, and then sometimes we just need to put it on a shelf, and it's like, you know what, I can't deal with this right now. And we're going to put it on the shelf, but we're going to bring it back out at another time. And then one of my favorite Christian practices is lament.
Yeah.
And sitting with the Lord and telling him, I'm very angry about this, and I'm angry with you. We call it the wrestling tent with the Lord,
Yes.
of being okay. And I also, like, how do we hold this grief and this gratitude at the same time? And what does that look like? And each day that might look different. And so I think, like what you were saying, that the mentality of a victim or positivity, but it's like it's somewhere in the middle, and it's somewhere in this present, and that's where the Lord heals us as well. Is like he heals us in the present. And so if we can sit there with the Lord and be okay that it's a little uncomfortable right now, but he wants us, and he walks with us. We use Psalm 23, in this restore space, is that restoring is a continuous restoring from Psalm 23:4. He restores our soul, and he's continuously restoring us. And so if we can come from the mindset of that, or at least have people around you to say, okay, we got this. And again, that's a little bit partly why we do this in groups, is like, oh, I'm dealing with that too. I thought I was the only one.
It's true. When we see others grieve, I think it can give us permission to feel like we can as well. Jesus grieved. I mean, we always say we want to be more like Jesus, but nobody ever says, like, I want to be more like Jesus, so I cried. Jesus grieved. He wept. Yeah, wept is not crying. Wept, like, that's weeping. Jesus wept. And yet that's not a way in which we ever talk about we want to be more like him. But it's throughout scripture, like you said. I mean, my favorite lament psalm is Psalm 42. If somebody's like, I just need to invite a little bit of that sad space in so I can feel my feelings, man, go to Psalm 42 and you will feel all the feels. Sean, I don't know if you have a favorite. You have a resource actually that you created around this using the Psalms, correct?
Yeah, we use Psalm 22. And Psalm 13 is a big one. I think 77. Is it Psalm 88 where it's like there's no end to it? It's just like, because usually in Lament, it's like at the end they're like, oh, well, got to tell him how good he is. It's like, well, not in every psalm does he have to tell him. Okay.
You're right. I think there is that one, and it might be 88. I think you're right. People, you'll have to check. Don't be a Berean. Look it up. But there is one psalm that just ends in a little bit of despair, and you're like, oh, did someone slip and allow this in the Bible? Is this okay? Hey, it's one psalm out of 150 psalms. It's okay. Yeah.
But it's not forever.
It's not forever.
And so
it's not forever. Yeah. But I think fear keeps people from going there, like we talked about earlier. Just a fear that if I go there, I'll never come back out. If you do it alone, you might, but you just brought up do it in community. Don't do it alone. Do it with somebody. And if you think I don't have somebody, That's what a debrief is for. If you've never heard of a debrief, I was like, what the heck is a debrief? I had never heard of a debrief the whole time I was living abroad. Found out afterwards, like a while afterwards. But it's a place where you go specifically to do this with people and with counselors who get it. And there are places all over the United States if you're from the US. And if you're not from the US, there are places that do this around the world. So, and we'll post some links to this as well where you can find out places to do these. But find a group. There's a place in Michigan called Alongside where you can go for like 3 weeks and process through all this stuff. So get what you need. And if there's a financial cost to it, let your supporters know, like, this is something our family needs. And I really believe if you're supposed to be there, God will provide a way to get that. I don't say that in like a fake faithy way, like God will provide. Hey, you're missionaries. You know that God provides. You know what that faith journey looks like. So ask. And if you don't know how to communicate to your supporters, ask the debriefers. Or ask ChatGPT, man. No, don't ask ChatGPT. They might know. They seem to know everything nowadays. But ask a debriefer. How can I communicate to my supporters that this is something I need to raise funds for? And they, of course, will be able to give you words. They believe in what they're doing. So yes, do that alone. And so speaking of, they've gone through some of that grieving process. Let's talk again just for a minute, Shonna. We talked about that feeling of losing purpose when you come home. So for missionaries who are feeling that they're grieving, they don't know what on earth they're supposed to do next. How could it possibly be as meaningful as it was before? What's one thing they can do to just start moving forward in that direction? We're not giving you a solution to all of life right now, but what is one thing they can do to start moving in a good direction?
Well, once after the grieving, is like, where is God working? See where he's working around you. And that could be, in a public school, that could be in your church. It could be, I'm going to go sit at Panera and pray for people. There's so many different ways. And I'm just so surprised of how, we have all these people that come together, and it's like everybody's got something different that the Lord is asking of them. So I would just say, like, just ask the Lord, just like, is there a group of people that you might have a heart for now that you might not have had a heart for? Like, my heart is for people in Reentry. I didn't know that, so I went to Reentry. That's right.
Yes.
What the thing. so I would think that would be just a great start. Journaling, speaking. We have resources of, what's our personality. I think looking at our season, like maybe you went overseas and you were single and now you're married with 4 kids. Things are going to look differently, and you might need to do things differently now than what you thought.
But what good advice to just start with observation, like notice, like you said, what's God doing in you and what is God doing around you? And that's something I think anyone can do. And just to share a piece of our own story, because that is exactly how the Lord did it with us. We started noticing. And I know for us, the Spanish speaking pastors that we'd worked with before, who my husband had always been meeting with them to do, consulting through our church we were part of in Peru, to help them think through small groups or systems or ways to strengthen the church or grow the church. I mean, all these strategic type things. Well, he'd built really great relationships with them while that was all going on, and just naturally become friends because he's just like that. He's an amazing friend. And so when they were calling during COVID, well, we moved back, I think, at the end of 2020. In 2021, he got calls, and he just figured we were still working for the church back in Peru from here. And in all the calls, they would say, we want to talk about small groups. We want to talk about this. We want to talk about that. And as he was talking to them, within the first, 2 minutes, he realized it wasn't about small groups. It was about life and their relationships and their church. And I mean, grown men just weeping. And then all of a sudden we started in that first year having Latin American pastors say, hey, can we come up and stay with you for a couple of years? Or a couple of years, I'm sorry, a couple days or a week. And we're like, it's Minnesota. It's winter. Like, and they started one by one. And in less than a year, we had 7 pastors call, ask, fly themselves up to come and stay with us and just process life. And so, speaking to observation, we started to go, okay, what's happening here? This is a lot of times. This is highly specific. Lord, what are you doing? And that was what led us to formalize our nonprofit so we could raise funds to start doing these retreats for Spanish speaking pastors. And then on the flip side, when we went through trauma therapy, I remember my husband went through it first. He's so good that he lets me share this stuff on the podcast. I love you, Danny, if you're listening. And I remember when I went through it a couple of months later, I remember being in that week-long therapy, and I looked at the therapist and went, this is totally something my husband could do, and not even could do. Like, I've watched him doing a untrained person, version of this with all these pastors on our couches, and kind of came back and was like, I don't know. But again, observing. And so I give these examples, and I love that you are shared some examples too, Shonna, because for each of you missionaries, if you are coming back, just start noticing, what is your heart being drawn to? What opportunities might be opening up? And we want to be realistic. It could take you a long time. For some of you, God might open a door immediately. For some of you, this could be years down the road. So, Shonna, let me ask you, what would you say to the missionaries where this seems to take just a really, really long time? And as they're observing, they are feeling more confusion than clarity.
Been there. Yeah, I think getting a career coach, or bringing the right people alongside that, or the Rebuild workbook, to say, oh,
Yes.
I don't know. I don't even know what I can bring. I think that's a lot of it. It's like, I don't even know. So just giving structure to that, of like, what has changed? What's the same? Like,
Yeah.
your vision of helping people. Like, I get that one a lot. It's like, well, I still feel like I want to help people. Oh, well, you can help people in lots of ways. You can go in and you can get paid for that too. So there's like a lot of people actually go into counseling, teaching, or the medical field. So there's in depending on finances and how that works, it's like, I still, like, God has in my heart that I'm supposed to serve people, and I think you can do that anywhere in anything. And so
Mm-hmm.
or maybe not, or maybe it's just like, I think I'm done with that and I'm going to go work on computers. Or
And that's valid too.
yeah, and I don't think there's a right or wrong. It's just like,
No.
well, let's just notice and be curious, and let's try a few things. And sometimes, like, well, let's just try it. I think, this whole reentry experts and how it came was like, well, we're just going to try it, and I'm just going to talk to people about it. So I went to PTM and said, hey, I'm noticing this with people. Are you noticing this when people come back? And they're like, oh yeah, I noticed that. And it's like, well, it's like this three seasons, and then a book publisher comes and says, hey, why don't you write a book about it and we'll publish it? And then it's just, and then, like I said, we had 40 organizations come to a webinar last 2 weeks ago
So
about,
awesome.
like, how do we serve missionaries in this season? And I'm like,
Yes.
and like, God is like, I'm just trying to keep up with him
Yeah.
in this.
Okay. I want to say PTM for any of our listeners who are like, what the heck is PTM? PTM is a member care conference for people who work to serve missionaries. And Shauna's going to be speaking at that this fall, and I'm going to be there. So I'm excited. I'm going to get to hear you while you're there. But I'm glad you brought up try, Shauna, because you got to try stuff out. Because you and I right now are talking from a place where God has placed us in a space where we're thriving. I mean, this we are doing what I think He's equipped us and called us to do in this season. But hey, we both went through seasons where we were trying other things, throwing other spaghetti noodles up at walls, and things were not sticking. And there are times too, you just need to just get a job, any job. And
Yeah.
if you still have that heart to serve, go volunteer on the weekends or in the evenings. And so it's not sitting around waiting for this perfect job. Neither of us fell into these, ideal, perfect things. So I want to be careful as we say we are in a good space now, and this is to give you hope and to inspire you, like there are exciting things ahead. But don't sit around waiting for those as you're observing, because sometimes the doors open as you are walking through whatever door you see in front of you.
Yeah.
The trying is what leads to those
Yeah.
places. And the trying doesn't always work. Sometimes you might do something and you do it for a couple months and it's like, whoa, that was not it. Well, guess what? You just got some great information that was not it. Cross
Exactly.
that off the list. That's still forward movement. Good job.
Right. And I think that's so hard for missionaries returning. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's like, because it's like, it was so clear that we were supposed to go over.
Yep.
And now it's not. And it's like, I almost feel like maybe he trusts us with, like, it doesn't necessarily, you could be an Uber
Yeah.
driver, or you could, work at Target. Like that. I mean, I don't know how many days I was like, I'm just going to go work at Target. Because
We had that
I'm
conversation.
just going to
Yeah.
stock shelves because that's,
Sometimes you need that though. Sometimes
yeah,
you
I
need a
feel
space of
that
a job where you
way.
don't have to think for a little while and you can just kind of work through that grieving process and unplug mentally. And that's okay. Like, not only
Right.
is it okay, that might be what God has for you in the season. And I think so much of this, Shonna, has to do too with not feeling shame over it. That shame where you're just like, I've done something wrong and this is God's punishment. And just the humiliation sometimes of trying to answer people's questions. Quit trying to answer them. Or if you're going to answer them, like just own it. Like own what you're doing. I am stocking shelves at Target right now. And you know what? Man, this is just what God has for me in this season while I just rebuild and look at life and figure out what's next for me. So I find so much joy in being a blessing to my coworkers. What a unique experience. How great, like you said, that God has entrusted me and placed me here in this season. And I am going to be the best shelf stalker that there is, because there is no shame in that. We think to go from missionary to a job like that, like there's shame. There's not. There is joy and opportunity and honor in any work that God places before you. So I hope that was for somebody. Just
Yeah.
take a step forward, go for it. Shauna, I
Mhm.
want to make sure we don't forget too, as we round this out, to bring up all the resources that you have, because for everybody, whether they are getting ready to go on the field to any one of these 3 seasons, they would probably love some of those checklists that you talked about. I've got a couple of your workbooks. They're fantastic. Can you list out some of your resources and how people can get a hold of you so they can start digging into all this?
Yeah. So of course we've got, for each of these 3 seasons, we have different resources. So for the pre-return, we have checklists, 90 days out, 60 days, 30 days, um, a week out, of just practical things and emotional things that you can do during that time. Once you get to the States, we have we call an arrival 6 months of, a lot of it is just actually working through the Psalms, on the spiritual level, but also on the practical side of things. So we've got a planned return is 6 months, unplanned is 9 months. Um, and then we also have some little devotions, that are 6 weeks. We do everything in 6 weeks. We feel like a 6 weeks is like, you can always, like, people will commit to 6 weeks, but they might not, commit to something longer. Um, and then for Restore, you can buy the workbook, and do it on your own. We don't totally recommend that, but I do have people that just buy it, and work through it. Or you have, people in your organization, like a group had to come home for some reason. They go through Restore together. We do have groups, in the fall, in spring. So we'll have small, we always have fall groups and spring groups. And people like it because it's sort of a third space.
Yeah.
We're not necessarily, it's not necessarily, or because, sometimes organizations cause the trauma. So
That
we'll
is
be
true,
real with that.
unfortunately. Yep. We're honest here.
And then we've got a digital course through Restore, and then we've got the Rebuild. So just help for the transition season. And
Yes.
we're also looking at maybe a membership of 2 years of material drop
That's good.
in. We're working on that. I'm still trying to figure out the end of that, but also we don't know where the Lord's gonna go with that. And the book. So the book,
I was just going to say, fall 2025, something fun is happening.
is I think it's called the Reentry Journey. So we look at sort of a trauma informed space. You don't have to go through trauma to read the book. This isn't just for this is for anybody that's come back, but we come from it from a trauma informed perspective, that people might have it. And then we look at the 3 seasons. But then at the end of the book, we have how does your organization and church work together to create a support network for your missionaries that have come back for 2 years. And like, how do you guys meet together? How do we meet? So, partly is going through this book. I have other organizations. It's like this, we're using this as a workbook to like, we'll have the same words, same vocabulary. Just like, oh, this person is in Reentry. Are they in Restore? Oh, they might be. You're probably in all 3. At different depending on the day that you wake up. So it's not linear, but there is a structure to it.
There's some stages. And so we'll post a link to all that, including a pre-order link for the new book and all of these great resources. So for anybody listening, whether you are a missionary or you serve missionaries, you've got some tangible steps that you can take to go through this process stronger. So again, there is hope. I don't want to even say on the other side, there's hope through it. As you said earlier, Shonna, we hold grief and we hold gratitude in the same space. And so on the same days that you might be crying your heart out, you also can be praising God and celebrating him for bringing you to where he needed you to be and for the good things he's done in your life. So this is a time to grieve and it's a time to celebrate. It's a time of winter of things dying and it's a time of spring of new beginnings. And we believe that God is going to get you from where you are to where he needs you to be. So Shonna, thank you so much for joining us today. We loved having you.
Thank you.